Hi Glamour Ghouls, it's me, Rogue. Welcome back to my channel. My arm matches my face, but neither match my chest. That's drag. That is just drag. The Mortuary Collection, darling, is a 2019 horror anthology written, directed, and produced by Ryan Spindell. It's set in the fictional town of Ravensend and follows the story of a misguided young woman who takes refuge in an eerie, decrepit mortuary. She is greeted by the eccentric undertaker who begins to recount the macabre and twisted tales from his long career. Now, personally, I don't have a ton of exposure to horror anthologies. The only ones I really remember seeing and liking were Trick or Treat and VHS. I also watched Goosebumps when I was younger, if that counts, maybe. So it's not that I have anything against the subgenre. It's just not something I've actively sought out. So I didn't really expect a whole lot going in, but I came away completely enamored with this movie. I am kind of obsessed. Let's start with the amazing wraparound. This movie's version of the Crypt Keeper is Montgomery Dark, the morbid mortician played by none other than Mr. Krabs himself, Clancy Brown. When writing the character, Spindell knew he wanted to pay homage to classic horror anthologies like Creepshow and Tales from the Crypt, but he also found himself wondering what was the Crypt Keeper like when no one was around. Is he sad? Is he lonely? Is he throwing on a wig and doing horror movie reviews? Who knows? Well, Monty is the answer to that question. Oh, phone! Well, Monty is the answer to that question. We see what he's like both when he's alone and then when he's in the company of others. He goes from being very sad and down in the dumps to theatrical and over the top when he's telling a story. This provides a lot of depth to the character, I think anyway, because he's not just a narrator in a sense, he's actually a character, and that really makes the wraparound itself a lot more interesting. And Clancy Brown's performance is perfectly complemented by our other main character, Sam, played by Caitlin Custer. Custard? Played by Caitlin Custer. Sam is portrayed as strong-willed and quick on her feet when we first meet her. We know she's tough because when she first meets Monty, she's not at all intimidated by his creepy tales, and there's almost this kind of sense that the two have met their match in a way. This makes for a very interesting dynamic and actually makes the wraparound as a whole feel more, well, sometimes feel more entertaining than the actual story segments themselves. Speaking of which, these are the morbid tales of how various people from the town of Ravensend have met their fate. Supposedly, they take place over several different decades, but I didn't really pick up on this mainly because Ravensend in general, even in the present day, has a very retro aesthetic. Like, you can even see in the opening scenes that, there are cars and shop fronts that are basically just plucked out of the 50s. They start out relatively tame and grow more dark and disturbing as we go along. Each segment itself is kind of a short movie, in a sense. They pay homage and tribute to a bunch of different horror subgenres. You have slasher, creature feature, even psychological horror. And I'm really impressed that given all this variety, the movie still maintains a very consistent pace. Like, it never feels like it's slowing down or speeding up, and they all seem to fit together very well. This is probably due to Spindell's extensive experience with making short movies. He knows that as a filmmaker, you need to cram as much story into as few scenes as possible, and I think he pulls that off fairly elegantly here. Oh, also worth noting, the final segment of this movie was actually released as its own standalone short movie back in 2015 before production had even begun on the Mortuary collection. I'm not going to name the name of the movie just because I feel like it's a spoiler, but it fits in so well with the rest of the movie that I honestly would not have known if I didn't look it up. So yeah, that's just a little tidbit for you. There's a super stylized production design with this fantastic vintage aesthetic like I mentioned earlier. I said in my monthly recap for April that I feel like the creepy queen of confectionery herself, Christine McConnell, had a hand in bringing Ravensend to life. It's just, with the vintage and the retro aesthetic, there's that, but also like a hint of something sinister going on throughout all the story segments. It's very her. I've also heard it described as Guillermo del Toro-esque, and I think that's a very fair comparison. And comparing this to the work of someone like Guillermo del Toro really speaks volumes about the movie's production quality, because this movie, the main source of funding came from a Kickstarter by Ryan Spindell a few years ago. They raked in just over $60,000, which, that's not a lot of money. I mean, let's just say Miss Spindell, she knew how to make her money work for her, okay? And sure, there are one or two things in the costume or effects departments that suffer as a result, but honestly, you don't really notice them that much. Apart from all the technical stuff, I think this movie is going to leave a long-lasting impression on me just because it's clear as day that this was a passion project to come to life. Spindell kickstarted the movie originally because of his love for the genre. He just wanted to set out and make something that he himself would want to see. He and his production crew shared the mantra that if it wasn't fun, they didn't want to film it, and it looks like, to me anyway, that they stuck with that until the end. You can probably tell that I have very few complaints about this movie. The Mortuary Collection is an excellent horror anthology with a unique and entertaining wraparound, with story segments that pay homage to different horror subgenres. They're excellently crafted and they never break the overall pace of the movie. It's a high quality experience that exceeds the expectations of what you can make on a low budget, and I'm going to give it an A+. And that's it. If you want to see more horror and more drag, be sure to subscribe and give this video a like. Thank you so much for watching. I spent a lot of time on this makeup, so I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. And until next time, stay glamorous, stay ghoulish.